Hello and welcome back to El Partido, yet another Spanish football podcast, but as always with a nostalgic twist. Happy New Year, everybody. It is 2026. We've had a good start to the year if you are watching Spanish football. Not so much if you are into politics or doom mongering or anything like that. Probably not as good. So we're here to cheer you up mainly, which is going to be great. No Paul tonight. You may have seen the tweet we put out there. He's currently on an El Partido paternity leave. Congratulations, Paul. He's had a beautiful baby over the festive period, so he'll be back soon. But I'm delighted that we've got our unofficial third host, as I'm going to keep referring you to until he accepts it, Matt Harrison, joining us for an episode this evening. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me on. And I'd also like to say congratulations to Paul and his wife or partner as well. So great news that.
Yes. No name yet. I have sent him suggestions, and he's running them past Kate, but I don't think they're going down very, very well. Mainly, I think the bigger suggestion I've made is Manuel, after Manuel Pellegrini. Obviously, not just from a Spanish football perspective, but obviously ex-Man City manager, the charming man would be a great name. So I'm still hoping that somewhere in that name there'll be the name of that discerning gentleman as well. So fingers crossed. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight, man. We're not here to talk about Manuel Pellegrini once again. We've already done that with Rahul a few weeks ago. We're here to pick up our next step, our next page, our next chapter of our Sleeping Giants arc. And this is where we basically look at clubs in Spain that we regard to as sleeping giants. They are teams that are outside of La Liga with huge fan bases, huge potential, big histories, and are just fantastic clubs in their own right. We've done Deportivo La Coruña, we've done Real Zaragoza, and this week we are looking at a place you've just been to, Matt. We are on the Asturian coastline. We are in Gijón. We are looking at Real Sporting de Gijón.
Yeah, definitely a really, really fun weekend away I've had up in the north of Spain. A long way for me to travel from the south of Spain, but I was rewarded with a Malaga away win. But we're here to sort of celebrate Sporting, so I won't perhaps talk about that 3-1 success too much.
No, if you do want to hear that, obviously go out, check out your El Partido en Directo we just released earlier today. So that is definitely one you can go and check out if you want to be with Matt in the crowd at El Molinón this past weekend. But Gijón's not just a place where obviously you go to watch Malaga pick up 3 points, Matt. It's quite a special place to you as well, because we were having this discussion over Christmas, weren't we? How well travelled you are across Spain. I think there's possibly only a corner of it you've not been to yet. Yeah. However, Gijón holds quite a special place for you, doesn't it? Is it your favourite city?
No, I'd perhaps say it's not even my favorite in Asturias, but I do like Gijón, yeah. So about first time I ever went to watch Malaga play away actually was about this time 6 years ago, and I went to their fierce rivals, Real Oviedo, but I did make sure to go and visit Gijón. I did go to watch Gijón Industrial when I was there that time. So I've been there that time. Then obviously when I did the Camino, I walked through it and stayed there the night. So it was a lot sunnier that time. And yeah, obviously I went this weekend. It's really distinctive city. Like obviously it's a port city. It's sort of beautiful, but also quite like rugged as well. It's and yeah, it's like very much like the city seems to like lean towards the beach, which and when I got there Saturday evening or Saturday afternoon, there wasn't really much of a beach left because the tide had come in, and particularly brutal the weather when I got there. So it was really smashing against the Paseo. But yeah, I would say, it's hard to me to pick. There's a few other places in Asturias I really like, but for me, they are probably my favorite people in Spain.
Yeah, no, I think I remember you saying now Asturias is one of your favourite places, isn't it? And I recall you saying that you went through, you took the Ave up there this week, and you came through a, sort of like a really long tunnel. And it's as if you appeared in a completely different country, and that's sort of the nature of Asturias as a whole, and probably a lot of other places on the northern coast of Spain as well. It's probably so far removed from what us as tourists probably expect from Spain. Certainly, obviously, where around you live, that in Marbella and the Costa del Sol, it's a bit more heat orientated.
Yeah,
Trying to think of a bit more deserty at times if it wants to be, but it is a really beautiful part of the world, and
yeah,
football is such a part of it as well, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. It's like as well because obviously a month ago I was in Valladolid, which is on the train from Madrid to Gijón. It goes that way? So yeah, like you said, is Valladolid and then like Leon are like completely different, but they're not actually that far from Asturias. And then yeah, like I said, go through that tunnel and you're suddenly in this like misty green, dare I say, it looks a lot like my homeland of Wales, yes, but definitely there's a lot of cultural, signposts in Gijón, and I'd argue the football club is one of the main sort of lifebloods of that city. You get a real sense of it being a sporting city.
Yeah, and I think you get that dotted around all the other places as well, because we see a lot of instances where you could go to a city in Spain, and natural there'll be a lot of Real Madrid fans, Barcelona fans, blah blah blah, usual story. However, in Asturias, you can get a real sense of tribalness, not just around the cities, but around the football. If you go to Gijón, you've got Real Sporting fans. If you go to Oviedo, you've got really ardent of Real Oviedo fans. Same even with Aviles, you've got Real Aviles Industrial. Those guys could quite easily support one of the other two big clubs in Asturias, but they are hardened supporters of their hometown team. And I think that really comes, alongside you've kind of already alluded to that strong working class identity. Like you say, it is rugged, it is industrial. All the teams have got sort of industrial in the name, haven't they?
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of areas where, they do really identify with where they're from.
Yeah, and I think I might have mentioned it on the Indirecto podcast I did from there. On Saturday night, I was in a bar watching. I'm trying to get it the right way around. It was Espanyol Barcelona was Saturday night, and then Sunday night was Real Madrid v Betis, and it really jumped out at me. There was no one in there. There was one barman for the Real Madrid game that cheered the Real Madrid goal, but he was the only person I saw cheer a Barcelona goal or Real Madrid goal in there. There was no one there, no one in there in Real Madrid Barcelona shirt. And yeah, on the Sunday, obviously Sporting were playing on the Sunday, but I did make a point of seeing if I could spot anyone wearing either those shirts. And I think I saw a couple of kids in Lamine Yamal shirts, but that was it. And I was like, wow. And obviously, as a Malaga fan, and the support for Malaga in the city of Malaga's improved dramatically in the years I've lived here. But you go to a bar when Real Madrid are on, and there's going to be a lot of people supporting Real Madrid. So yeah, that really did jump out to me, and I distinctively noticed it. And I can't really, the only other place I could think to have been like that is Bilbao, where Bilbao, you won't see any of them. And like you said, I think Oviedo would be quite similar as well. They're very proud people up there, especially they see themselves as a bit different to the rest of Spain in the sense that they see themselves as Asturian, but they're sort of quite proud of the fact they were the ones that didn't the Reconquista and all that. They're the ones that sort of started it, claim no one's really invaded them. They sort of they like their sort of tough persona. Yeah, but they're, like I said, they're very, very welcoming, fun people I found up there.
Yeah, and I imagine, being a Welshman as well, there are, a lot of similarities. The geography we already said, but obviously being a coal mining region, you even found a Wales bar, didn't you? If I remember rightly, from what you were telling me.
With our friend of the podcast, Liam Bambridge. He was shooting off straight away on his crazy trip where he drove from A Coruña to Gijón and then went back to A Coruña to watch Depor play. So he had about 45 minutes with me, and we said, let's go to a bar. I said, there's loads on the street leading up to the stadium. And I said, does that say Gales? And he was like, yeah. And there was a Cafe Gales with lots of, Welsh dragon iconography over it. And I was like saying to the barmaid, I said, I'm from Gales. And she was like buzzing as well. And I was like, I'm buzzing. So yeah, there's definitely a connection there. Obviously being a principality as well, although I know, perhaps the Welsh don't celebrate that part as much. Coal mining, yeah, it is. And it looks, certainly the landscape looks like Wales. I don't think they'd mind me saying that.
No, a home from home potentially. Maybe that is why the affinity is there, an unconscious love of home, maybe. So we're going to get into talking about what makes Real Sporting a sleeping giant, and at this point now, you'd easily want to dive into the history when it all started, but we're not going to do that because I think we've got a shared appreciation of the football ground that Sporting play in, and that is El Molinón. One of the oldest, or claims to be the eldest, football stadium in Spain, really steeped in history. I know you've walked past it when you were doing the Camino. Obviously, you were there this weekend. It's one of the must-visit football destinations in Spain, I would say. If you want to go to a game, preferentially a Asturian derby game, it's got to be at El Molinón, hasn't it? Yeah,
it is. Like, to be honest with you, it's like, obviously I've been here a while now, and I've had my sort of bucket list of stadiums, and it was never, I'd happily go, but I was never like desperate to go there. But yeah, it's gone into like, it's very high up on my favorite stadiums in Spain now, having been there. And it's really interesting as well, because I know we sort of touched upon it a little bit with Sporting Gijón, is if we're going to be speaking basic terms and be really generalizing, they're the sort of working class club of Asturias, and Oviedo are sort of more, I don't know, cultural and a bit more, I don't want to use the word aristocratic, that's too strong, but seen as a bit more refined. And I think that's reflected in the football stadiums, actually, because Carlos Tartiere is like really quite shiny and quite grand, and El Molinón, we can venerate it, lots on this podcast here. One thing I will say about it, though, it's ugly from the outside. it's not had much sort of, because especially like Sporting, the red and white, so distinctive, their colours. The stadium's just like sort of grey and black from the outside. There's bits of red and white on it, and obviously it's got the big Sporting logo. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a pretty one from the outside, but it feels, it's very big from the outside. And the other thing I think I said on the Indirecto episode was, and I think I said to Liam after the game, it must be in the whole of Spain, and I think I did think of something to compete with it, the best walk to a ground in Spain, because you do pretty much walk down past the sea, like you go down the Paseo by the beach, because that beach, I think I read, it's a mile long. It's a long old beach, and then it goes towards like this little stream, and you walk down the side through this pleasant park, and yeah, the stadium sort of just emerges in the park. It's really nice walk. Yeah, like you said, as a bit of a football history geek, there's a lot of history there. I think it's compulsory. I mentioned my belief it was the only football stadium to have an Oscar attached to its name for the 1982 Oscar-winning, what they call it, Best Foreign Language Film, Volvere Empezar. Someone else did say to me there might be a film with San Lorenzo Stadium in it, which won an Oscar, but I forgot what film it is. But I thought that was quite fun.
Yeah. A fact that was always brought up on the Geary cast as well. Yeah. Whenever we were playing away at Malaga, it was always a staple of. I think we definitely need to put that question out there before the release of this podcast as well, actually, so we can get the answer.
I don't know if you know this, but perhaps people, just to add sort of to the sort of working class sort of links to the sea and all that. Do you know what El Molinón means?
I don't know.
It means the big mill. So it's because there used to be a water mill where the stadium is, or maybe next door. I can't remember, but it's not there now. And
it did, yeah. I think that's what. Like I said, I remember typing that the other day now, so I feel a bit foolish that I didn't even make the connection. But because, like I say, they have this claim where they say that the oldest, continuously used pitch in Spain, as you call it, because obviously stadiums evolve, and we'll talk about how El Molinón has evolved over time. But I think it's Avila that kind of like counteract that claim to say, actually, no, we're the oldest. And I think Recreativo de Huelva also say that they've got the oldest pitch as well. So I think they're all of that era, back sort of like in the early, 20th century. The great thing about El Molinón as well is, like you say, where it is and how it was built, sort of like with this sort of mismatch of stands. And I think you've kind of alluded to it already, where you've got all this black facade around the outside. It's essentially all the renovations that happen in Spain sometimes are to hide a multitude of sins, as we'll call it, because the idea is you want to make them look really nice and flash and fancy. But what Real Sporting de Gijón had with El Molinón for a long time, especially after the 1982 World Cup, was just this 4 different size stands, none which could join up in corners, none which, particularly looked great. And I think if you read the Stadios de España article on the stadium that Chris writes, he calls it was the ugly duckling. It's kind of emerged now into bits of a beautiful swan, because it does look a lot better now with the renovations it's had. But it took 23 million euros to make that happen. So, they've got a place that they would call home to be proud of, but it was never always like that.
Yeah, it was like there was a moment. Well, actually, I think it was perhaps in the first 10 minutes of the game, because I was very fortunate that the game I did attend this weekend at El Molinón was very, very entertaining. So I didn't have that much time to look around, but I did sort of Malaga fans were in the corner, and I was looking up, and I was just like, this is a mess. There's not just different stands, there's different tiers. And like you said, they're all out of place. And yeah, that's why I loved it. The ground immediately came to mind, which I've not been there in a long time now. So, and obviously another ground that's famous for being renovated. It sort of reminded me of Anfield a little bit inside.
Yeah. I thought that.
Bit of especially the side I was on, where it was a little bit more, I don't know, unrenovated. And but it was really cool. And I was looking, because I was sort of, I don't know, I was just looking where the Sporting fans were, and they were sort of, scattered everywhere in this mishmash. So that's why I really liked it in the end, because it was just so different. Because obviously I do like going to the big sort of Spanish bowl stadiums like La Rosaleda, but this felt a bit more like a football league ground in a way, actually.
Yeah.
So obviously, because it's got roofing as well, which isn't, prominent in Spanish stadiums, but.
Fun fact, it was the first all-covered stadium in Spain as well, back in 1969. Thank you, Stadios España, for that fact as well. And in terms of the home support then, and I suppose we'll come on to the fans later itself, but in terms of the noise that this stadium can generate, and the roof on it being quite a big part of that, I reckon. Because like you said, we do get good atmospheres in Spain, but sometimes the noise can be lost to the sky, can't it? In here, on the right game, when Real Sporting are on song, and when you're on a derby match against Real Oviedo, there's probably nowhere else in Spain where you get an atmosphere like this.
To be honest with you, obviously they did the hymno at the start. That was really impressive. It was loud in there, mainly because their fans were getting very frustrated with the referee. But so Malaga were 2. Was it 2? No, I can't remember how the score went now. But when Malaga were 2-0 up, and then they scored a penalty to go 2-1, and obviously the roof came off then. And then they almost scored straight away. And I remember thinking it was crazy loud for a bit. And I was like, whoa. So yeah, I agree. For those, I've seen footage of the Asturian derbies and stuff, and it does sound very loud, but I get now that place could be a cauldron, perhaps more than most stadiums in Spain because of the roof and stuff. But yeah, and because everyone's sort of squashed in. Obviously, perhaps I didn't notice as much as well, because the ultras were up the other end of the stadium to where we were. But yeah, it was really loud. I particularly remember this chance when they almost went to make it 2-2, sort of going, whoa, because it was so loud.
I feel, especially when Malaga play away from home, and obviously they go to other big stadiums around Spain too, whether it's, like you say, we went to Valladolid recently, or whether they go, away to, an Elche or something like that, maybe. And there's always a sense, really, that, if they pick up a point, they go, oh, that's pretty impressive. They picked up points away from home. That's good. I feel like when you go to places like El Molinón, I put Riazor into this category as well. If you come back with 3 points from there, you're thinking, fucking hell, that's a great job. That is a result there. And I think the stadium does lend itself to being kind of like a bit of a coup when you get a win there.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's funny you say that, because in my head, perhaps because of the notions around Asturias in general, I was going, oh, it's always tough going to Sporting. We're always going to struggle there. And I looked at Malaga's record, and we're pretty good there, actually. We seem to win quite a lot. But yeah, you're right. There is sort of a, because it's far away from the south as well. It's like a different country, really. But yeah. So before the game, I was saying like, oh, it's going to be a tough one there. And I realized, no, we're quite good there. We're becoming a bit of a bogey team for them, I think, which is fine by me. But yeah.
Definitely. Two sleeping giants very much head to head in that one this weekend. And obviously both in the Spanish Segunda right now. As a club, in terms of just touch on a bit of a brief history, they started as a club back in, I think it was 1905, so celebrated 120 years anniversary this year. Changed the name to Real Sporting Gijón in 1916. Joined the La Liga competitions in 1929, 1930, so pretty much just after it all kicked off, and had always been, a pretty decent side throughout the years. They've spent a lot of time in the top flight, notably during the 1970s when they were there for, I think, 11 years on the run. They got promoted back into La Liga during the 1990s, when a bit of a UEFA Cup run, knocking out the likes of Partizan in the round of 32 of the UEFA Cup. Ultimately relegated in the mid-90s, defeating Lleida to survive a couple of times as well. And then I really sort of like get a bit of knowledge of Real Sporting sort of like during the noughties, because again, they become a bit of a yo-yo side, don't they, between La Liga and Segunda. You hear about them, you hear about the players that they had, and kind of just one of those that you could never really get to know them because they weren't around long enough. They're a bit West Bromish, if I could lend it a bit of a term.
Yeah, because obviously, like, I know I've perhaps talked about it on here before, and I've written about it for the El Partido magazine. I loved Championship Manager when I was a kid, and subsequently Football Manager. Yeah, Sporting Gijón were always sort of just there for me, and I didn't really, like, they always felt like, even though like we talking about like how proud Asturians are, they always felt like one of the most Spanish clubs, maybe because of, I don't know, growing up, it was quite fun as a kid, maybe to go like Gijón, and like it's quite a fun name to say. But I believe I didn't, someone can fact check this for me, but I did read that there's only 9 clubs in Spain that have never been below the Segunda, and they are one of them. So, I was sort of going through in my head, obviously you got the big boys, but that's quite an achievement for a club. Like you said, it's a club that like relies on local talent quite a lot. And I'm sure some of those names will get mentioned during this episode. So because the Spanish Segunda is a high level still, it's still like the professional league. So it's quite an impressive history, but you're right. They did seem to just bounce between second and first division. And obviously they've been the second division for quite a while now, but
yeah, it's one of those, and I think obviously they don't have to look far other than going down the road to see like what can happen to a club like this, with the way that Real Oviedo went dropping down to, I think, the 4th tier or 5th tier, actually, if I remember rightly. So it is actually quite impressive when you see clubs of this nature that, we might call them a yo-yo club, but actually staying in the top 2 divisions of Spanish football, having a history and a longevity as well, which is quite impressive too, because obviously you see a lot of clubs have slightly amended their names in the last, sort of like 50, 60 years as well, depending on financial difficulties. So I think it's, quite interesting that this club has managed to survive a lot of that. And like I say, we saw them during the noughties. Luis Enrique was there sort of toward the back end of the 90s. So obviously we'll talk about him later. David Villa came through there as well. And I think where, they really became quite known to me was that La Liga season that they had during the sort of like mid 2010s, sort of like 2015, 2017, I think it was. And it was that season when they were promoted to La Liga, and it was under the manager Fernandez, which we'll talk about later as well, and how they managed to stay in La Liga. And because it was a lot more accessible at the time, you kind of like then becoming a bit more aware of, well, it's not just Barcelona and Real Madrid and Atleti at the top. It's like, well, actually, who is becoming that attritional side at the bottom, and who's escaping potentially relegation down to Segunda? And it was a long old chase for Sporting Gijón for a long time.
Yeah, just going a few years before that. The one thing I did want to throw out is in the I didn't write the year down. It's either 2009 or 2010. Do you know what famous 9-year records they ended?
Oh, I think it's going to be one of two things. And I'm going to go with it's the lowest points tally thing, isn't it?
No, maybe, but it's not that what I was going for. They were the first team to beat a Jose Mourinho team at home in 9 years.
Really? Oh, that's quite impressive, actually. That's quite good.
I think, again, fact checkers, because I've not checked all of it. Yeah, but that Abelardo team, the one you mentioned that got promoted, like that sort of came out of the blue because Abelardo went in as, like, obviously he's a club legend. He's from Gijón. He played for them. Obviously went on to play for Barcelona. But when he came in as manager, I think he'd been like youth team manager and things like that. He was sort of going into firefight basically. And then all of a sudden he got them promoted to the big league again and then kept them up. So yeah, he is in sort of modern times, at least, like a true club legend, even though he did go back for a second spell and didn't quite work. And to be honest with you, I think everywhere he's gone between has not really worked off the top of my head. But
yeah, I think he was with Cartagena last season as well. Wanting, obviously, that wasn't a great season for the Murcians. But yeah, I think, like you say, the fact that he managed to get them into La Liga, sort of like against the grain, and then also survive in La Liga was always, a big bonus, really. Sort of like we look at these clubs that have done this in the last few years. We look at Recreativo de Huelva, we look at Hercules, and we can possibly even class Real Sporting and possibly even Real Oviedo this season that that kind of go in sort of against the run of play and try to do their best, basically. And I think when we look at Real Sporting de Gijón as a club, like you've just alluded to, they've been in the Spanish Segunda now for 9-10 years, or 9 going on 10 years. It's a long old slog, and they've shown moments of promise, haven't they? Where they've had a pretty decent run, and maybe flirted with the playoffs, or they've also had some seasons where they've survived by the skin of their teeth. And it just feels to me like if somebody could get this right, if somebody could put in the right, maybe infrastructure, the right funding into getting the right players, promoting, more of those club legends that you could have, like the Enriques, like the Villas, this could be a massive club on the same level of a, dare I say, an athletic club or a Deportivo de La Coruña or, one of those other sort of like, Valencia, for example. As far as like a regional ambassador is concerned, it's got the potential to be that big, doesn't it?
And it's quite interesting at the moment, of course, because you say that they're doing quite well in the league this season. They're just outside the playoffs. I think they were in the playoffs at the start of this weekend that's just gone, but they're not keen on their owners, and it's quite strange. The Real Oviedo and Sporting Gijón at the moment are owned by Mexican businesses who have ties to the Mexican league. So I think the team attached or sort of linked with the consortium with Sporting is, I think it's Atlas.
Yeah.
Or Pachuca, but was in Monterrey, not Pachuca. So yeah, but yeah, I totally agree. There's like pretty much, like I've lived in Spain now 7 years, and like when they do sort of the Segunda previews, like Sporting Gijón always feel like a team that's mentioned with, or they should be looking for playoffs at least. And I think off the top of my head, I think they've been in it once, and it was when they lost to what was a very, very good, or a good Espanyol team, but I don't think they've been in it more. They might have been in it twice, but yeah, they always feel like there is something there. Like I said, they've got this amazing academy, is quite famed. But yeah, they, like, I don't know. Yeah, Can't say I've watched much from this season. What I saw on the weekend, they were actually quite good. They've got players like Jonathan Dubassin, who I really like, Belgian guy, and their striker Otero, the Colombian. He's got goals in him. So yeah, but there's definitely like you said at the start of the episode, there is a giant to be awoken if someone can, I don't know, set the alarm loud enough.
Well, I think definitely there's potential there, and I think we can see this in the next conversation we're going to have around the. I'm going to try and give it the Spanish name without completely butchering it, but the El Derby Asturiano. I'm going to go with, which is slightly probably more Italian than Spanish, but as far as rivalries go, Matt, you must have seen your fair share, not just in Spain, but also, around Europe and especially in the UK. You're a Swansea fan. You've obviously got a fierce rivalry with Cardiff. As far as emotionally charged derbies go on the Spanish Peninsula, well, not peninsula, sorry, the Iberian Peninsula. This has got to be up there as one of the fiercest, isn't it? I can't really think of another derby which has this kind of genuine malice to it sometimes, like genuine passion around it.
Yeah, because I would argue it is the most fierce. I think other people would point to Sevilla v Betis, and that does look like, when they play and the sort of the aesthetics of those derbies and what goes on like around the ground and stuff, it does look incredible, but they share a city. And I always think it's never, I know some people say that makes it a proper derby, but I always think derbies are better when it's sort of city against city.
Yeah, I agree on that.
One club cities like Gijón and Oviedo. Yeah, like it is like a real hatred. I think the only other one people might mention is Vigo and Depor, like Celta and Depor, but I don't think it compares to this. And obviously, supposedly Spain has the biggest derby in the world in Real Madrid and Barca, but that's not fierce anymore. Even like the clubs are sort of in bed with each other in some ways, or have been in recent years. I know the Negreira case has perhaps sullied that a bit, and Super League stuff. But you see Barca fans, loads of Barca fans in their shirts in the Real Madrid end, and vice versa. So yeah, this I think as well, this game still has quite a lot, like a strong, what do you call it, like a police escort for like the away fans. Quite a lot, like a real, like strong away police escort. So yeah, I'd love to go to this derby. I'd be very sheepish around it all, but yeah, it's
it looked absolutely class, doesn't it? I think it looks, spring, and like many of the other derbies you just mentioned there as well, whether it be Sevilla Betis or Deportivo de La Coruña against Vigo, even to an extent maybe Madrid against Barca, if you really want to get quite stringent with the terminology. But this is rivalry rooted in not just geography but in class, isn't it? Like you've already alluded to that, in Asturias, Sporting are the sort of like working man's club, and Real Oviedo are maybe more the, I don't want to use the word elite, that's not the word I want to use, cosmopolitan, is that the right word to use?
That's a good word to use for it, I think. And also it's not just they again, I'm sure there's plenty of elitists in Gijón as well, but if we're speaking in those general terms, the thing I seem to pick up on is they're really proud of each one. Like Gijón are really proud to be the working class ones, and Oviedo are sort of like, we're better than them, we're more refined than them. And I know, like, I've read like things of Oviedo fans. Obviously, Oviedo is not by the coast; it's sort of about 45 minutes an hour inland if you were driving, I think. But they won't go to the beach in Gijón. They would go to one of Asturias's many other beautiful beach towns, and yeah, it is. It's sort of rooted in class. But yeah, they really don't like each other. I can confirm that.
Yeah, no, I 100%. And like you say, you see the shift in the atmosphere. It is palpable on Derby Day, especially in El Molinón as well. Obviously, we'll talk. I'm sure we'll do a Real Oviedo episode one day where we get to speak about the other side of that. But as you mentioned, you get tighter security, you get the heightened noise, the emotions, the La Mariona in full voice.
I'm sure you've seen it, but if anybody wants to get a bit of a idea of it, the Copper 90 Derby Days episode with Eli Mengum is really good at this. It's a derby, and it's the first derby in like 10, 15 years, and he goes to it's at Sporting, but he sort of explores both sides. It's very well done, and you in that video you do get a sense of just like I think you used the word malice earlier. There is a strong sense of that.
Well, that was I think it was the first league derby in 15 years, if I'm rightly, because I think it was 2019, if I remember. Yes. Both of them back in the Segunda División as well. And I think genuinely at some point whenever these games play, because obviously subsequently in the years gone past, we've had a few more of them, so they've been a bit more regular in the last sort of 5 or 6, 7 years or so. But I would genuinely go out into the street and ask any Real Oviedo or Real Sporting fan, would you rather do the double over said club or get promoted or finish higher in the league or whatever it might be? And I think 9 times out of 10, they would genuinely say, I'd happily get relegated as long as we did the double over Real Oviedo. That is the genuine extent that this rivalry runs really, really deep. And like I say, in that one that you've mentioned, the Copper 90 cover, more than 29,000 people in El Molinón, completely close to capacity, really cagey, really nervous match. It finished 1-1. We would talk about it as if there's been an absolute 3-0 riot match there. But, the rivalry is finely balanced. And I think it's only been this season where we've sort of seen like the bragging rights have maybe edged slightly towards Real Oviedo, obviously them getting promoted, and obviously a lot of the stories around Santi Cazorla going home and all that jazz that maybe Gijón feel a bit in the shadow at the minute. But, I bet they're enjoying this season for Real Oviedo as well for different reasons.
Yeah. This, I think you said about the derby's more important. I can imagine the end of last season. Not many Real Oviedo fans would have swapped a derby double promotion, because I'm sure they had a summer lording it over their rivals, and especially because obviously, like you said earlier, with Oviedo at the start of the first few years of the 21st century, getting sort of what do they call it, like a financial relegation to the 4th division. I'm sure like Sporting fans were really giving it to them then, and I don't think I'm trying to remember when it was now, but there is like a mad story, isn't it? I forgot. I can't even think what decade it was. I'm going to say there was talk of them merging the two clubs, which is just like the crazy, like quite recently, not like a early 20th century thing, like quite recent, like in recent decades, where they were going to be called the Real Asturias, and there was definitely a meeting between the two club presidents, and then when it sort of came out, they were a bit miffed, like, "Oh, what, you don't want us to merge?" And they were talking about building the stadium somewhere in between. It's a mad story, but I don't know. I don't think it got anywhere close in the end, but it was definitely an idea. They wanted to have almost like an Asturian national team sort of thing.
Yeah. That's absolutely. I've never heard of that before, so I'm definitely going to go and look into that. That could be an episode in itself. But imagine the outpouring from that, and you know what? Blank paper in front of me. When you look at how competitive, especially during that time that we're probably thinking about, was getting the pooling of resources. We've already sort of said it, haven't we? That teams, especially in this part of the world, do struggle to compete with the more metropolitan areas of Spain, like the Madrid sides, Barcelona sides, Valencia's, etc. So I can see why on paper why they would try to do it, but that's fucking mad.
I just checked April 2000, so it wasn't even that long ago.
Dear God, we'd have to share the article on that.
Yeah,
that feels like a Revista article that we could write as well, Matt. So let's put a pin in that one. We'll definitely come back to that, because that's both chaotic and blow my mind at the same time. So that's both fun and concerning.
And obviously, Oviedo, that was the start of their struggles. I'm sure they were much happier to have gone down to the 4th division than even get close to merging with them. So
yeah, relegators now. We're fine with that. But yeah, we've already mentioned as well, how much these clubs in Asturias, especially Real Sporting, rely on, local talent, homegrown players. Obviously, there are more famous parts of Spain for this. Obviously, I'm looking towards the Basque Country for this kind of inspiration. But Asturias does have its own sort of like dedication to homegrown talent, to promoting players, to relying on youth as well. And Real Sporting are exactly the same as this, and they're no different. We're just going to name a handful of players here, and I immediately want to talk to you about David Villa, because how much I love David Villa, but I'm going to restrain myself because there is one player that obviously is a complete, utter legend. El Molinón is actually named after him. So, it's Enrique Castro, also known as Kini. He's Sporting Gijón's greatest ever player, isn't he?
Yeah, and they don't mention it that often, but he's actually from Oviedo as well. They sort of, the Oviedo sort of dropped one there, and but he pretty much played, he played for Sporting when they're sort of, I guess, what many consider their real glory years, sort of late 70s, early 80s. Barcelona kept trying to buy him, and he was very much sort of staying at Sporting. He did eventually go to Barcelona, and then and there's the crazy story of him getting kidnapped for 25 days in Barcelona because, well, some people were just wanted to get some ransom money, basically. And he wouldn't press charges against them and said, they're okay, actually. They weren't that mean to me. They went to prison.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, there is actually talk of him having Stockholm syndrome. And yeah, they took him to like a basement in Zaragoza and locked him away. But yeah, and then I think it's the end of that season he gets kidnapped. He does win the Copa del Rey with 2 goals in the final for Barcelona against Sporting, which is quite, because I think that's the closest Sporting have come to winning a trophy. And but he goes back there as well. So he retires actually after Barcelona, but then he goes back there and sort of has a couple of seasons at the end. So yeah, but if you go to Gijón, it's like one of those things when, especially if you're in bars around the stadium, his image is the one that definitely stands out, and you see people with like, retro shirts with his number on the back. And obviously he wins like the Pichichi with them a few times, I think, in both divisions. And like you said, they named the stadium after him only a couple of years, well, it was about 7 years ago now, because he passed away quite suddenly. I think he was 68 when he passed away, and the next day they said, because I think they had the funeral in the stadium as well. He is like, I know you guys did that. Obviously, did an episode on Magico Gonzalez and Cadiz. It's maybe not as romantic as that one, but it's similar. It's he is the man there.
Yeah, and I think clubs in Spain do tend to. I'm not going to use the word latch, but they do have their idols, don't they? Whether whether it is a Magico Gonzalez or whether it is a Juanito, for example, or various different other ones, depending which club you're going out to. But really, at Real Sporting, it is Enrique Castro Kini. And like you say, if you go to the stadium now, the official name is named after him. All those Pachichis, all those appearances, he's definitely one of their greatest ever icons. I didn't know he was from Oviedo, though. To be fair, you've taught me something there.
There you go. If it's not Oviedo itself, it's certainly near Oviedo. But yeah, it's quite nice as well, because you go to lots of stadiums in Spain and they've got these, a name, and then the official name's usually got someone's name attached to it, and it's usually some club president or something. So it's nice to have one named after an iconic footballer. It's a bit more magical, I think. So yeah, it's now El Molinón Enrique Castro Kini.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that sounds absolutely perfect, because El Molinón itself, just to go out to stadium, is a great name. Next up on the list, I've got Luis Enrique. Obviously, there for a short time as a professional footballer. I think he was only there for 2 years, made like 36 appearances, but he is born in Gijón. He's an academy graduate of Real Sporting de Gijón, and obviously picked up, very early. Took a very unusual route as well, not one that is well trodden necessarily, but left Gijón to go to Real Madrid, then went from Real Madrid to Barcelona, and then that was it. I think that's where he retired at. And obviously he was a very impressive footballer during the 90s for Barcelona, obviously part of that midfield alongside Pep Guardiola. But obviously, like Pep, has become a world-class manager too. And, his career as a manager, really, there's only a handful of people you could probably hold up against him as a manager, isn't there?
Yeah, and I guess him as well. He feels, and he sort of talks about it as well. He feels very Asturian. He's a bit like lively, a bit mad. Obviously, he does like lots of like hyper runs and things like that, doesn't he? So yeah, he feels like a embodiment of all the Asturian sort of characteristics.
Madness.
Yeah. I really like. He was the Spain manager when I moved to Spain. I really, really enjoyed him as Spain manager, and I even though I'm no lover of Paris Saint-Germain, I'm happy for him to be doing well and getting celebrated a bit more, because I sort of think his the treble he won with Barcelona gets a little bit overlooked, just because he sort of had that sort of strange mid-season fallout with Messi, and then I thought it was quite good that he fixed that, really. And yeah, I love Luis Enrique. Again, it's another one of those ones from the Championship manager days where he could play pretty much every position on the pitch, so he was always quite useful on that. So I think I just like him.
A proper menacing looking footballer as well. Like, if you used to say to me, as far as a player looks, he's got more of a look of like Vinnie Jones about him, but he actually plays with a lot more guile, a lot more of intelligence. He was a really, really handy midfielder in his time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he could sort of just play anyway. He could be quite attacking, but he was like hard working. I always think, is the actor called Rufus Sewell? I always think he looks like him. I can't remember how you say the guy's name. I'm sure it's Rufus Sewell. He always reminds me of him. If there's going to be a film made of Luis Enrique, have I got his name? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so. I'm thinking of the name Rufus, but Rufus Howling is the only thing coming back into my mind. Yeah, and it's definitely not him.
It was the only thing I could think that he was in, because obviously it's just gone Christmas. He's in The Holiday.
Oh, I know who you mean now. He
like
plays.
Sort of like first love interest. Who's like,
what's he called? Leo or Theo or something like that, isn't he? Or something like that.
In A Knight's Tale, that's the other one. He's the sort of
basically he's the English bastard in The Holiday, and that's where we'll leave it at that then. But I definitely prefer Luis Enrique with hair, because he does look a lot less menacing. Though he does still do mental things, like he runs across Paris to go to work and all that jazz. It's a bit mad. A player who was at Barcelona, I think, just as Luis Enrique was going to become manager. I think they may have just missed each other at the Camp Nou. I think David Villa had just moved to Athletic this time. But David Villa started in Sporting, joined them after being told by Real Oviedo that he was too small to be a striker. Which I had no idea of, but obviously he's a native to Langreo, I think it is, which is not too far from Gijón. He was a Real Sporting fan as a kid. His idol was Kini, so to take this pathway into Real Sporting de Gijón, must have been absolutely ideal for David Villa. Again, similar to Luis Enrique, wasn't there for a massively long time, and I think if he was to ask him, I think he would have preferred to have stayed a little bit longer. Yeah. But ultimately, because of the club's financial position, he got sold on to Real Zaragoza after just 80 appearances, just 2 seasons at the club in Segunda.
Yeah, because I think most people sort of, obviously they remember David Villa at Valencia, and I think I know the Zaragoza shirt around that time is quite iconic. I think he might have worn that.
The Lotto one.
Yeah, his bit at Sporting's a bit overlooked, but his record's great. Like, it's sort of not far off a goal every 2 games, which sort of for a young striker is great. And obviously, in our lifetimes, we did that episode a few weeks ago where about the best Spanish players to play in England, and we give a lot of love to Fernando Torres. But you could argue David Villa's perhaps more of a Spanish striking legend. He was more consistent, did it longer. Obviously, top goal scorer, I think, in Spain's history as a national team. Yeah, and Gijón gave the world David Villa. So Well, yeah, what they call Mareo, the academy. Which
yeah. Well, I'm struggling to think of the Spanish word for it now, but he was known as the kid, wasn't he? Because wherever he went and whatever he was doing in the academy, he always seemed to play 2 or 3 years ahead of his actual age. So he was always sort of playing with players who were a lot older than him. And like you say, I think often he does get maybe just a little bit overlooked. But what he did with Valencia first, winning the Copa del Rey with them in that squad that had Juan Mata and David Silva and others that are in that team. That was such a fun team to watch. And then going on to Barcelona and being part of that team, alongside the likes of Messi and Co and going in to replace Samuel Eto'o effectively, which is big shoes to fill at Barcelona. He took it in his stride, and I think he's definitely got to be remembered as one of the greatest strikers of the 21st century for Barcelona. I know we're only 26 years into it, but he's definitely up there. Yeah,
he's sort of because obviously he's a finisher, but he was quite all action as well. Again, quite Asturiano. So yeah, I love David Villa. Obviously, he's got quite a cool look to him, hasn't he? That little sort of little goatee thing he had on the chin. He was a fun player. I really enjoyed him.
Cool guy. And current owner of, I'm sure you'll know the club.
Is it Benidorm?
It is Benidorm, yeah. Though I was expecting maybe to have seen them sort of emerge because he's owned them for a good few years now, and I've kind of been waiting for them to pop up into.
Still does. I don't know if he still does, but I haven't heard anything. Yeah, that's a strange. I wonder how that came about. That because he seems a long way from his Asturian home.
Yeah, and I was going to say, unless he had an affinity whilst he lived in and around Valencia, but it's still a good hour and a half drive from Benidorm to Valencia, isn't it? So
loves English bars, maybe.
maybe he loves the dog and gun and the Red Lion and loves a full English. Who knows? I would have loved to have seen him in the Premier League at the time, but I think, like you say, his affinity was always to play in Spain. Obviously, went on to play in. For New York City in the MLS when it was kind of like they were kicking off. And
I forgot that. Now you've said that, I saw his first ever goal for New York City because it was the first ever goal in their history. Because bizarrely, the first game in New York City's history was at the Etihad campus against St. Mirren. And David Villa scored the first goal. Because I was thinking, it's a shame I never seen him play live. And I just remembered I did.
There you go. Unusual surroundings, and New York City against St. Mirren is also. I can imagine if John McGinn was back in the squad then as well. Actually, that's quite a fun matchup. It probably aligns quite nicely, maybe.
I'm sure I've looked this up before. I think he might have been.
Yeah, Villa versus McGinn. I like that. The last player we've already mentioned him as the manager who brought Sporting Gijón back up to La Liga. Abelardo Fernandez, an academy product. He's from Gijón, a commanding centre back. He returns as manager, gets them promoted. He's just a symbol of Real Sporting, isn't he? Like saying, he's the one you probably don't know loads about or remember, but he is Mr. Gijón essentially. It's then your Gijón.
Yeah, and he followed. He played with Luis Enrique at Barcelona and for Spain as well. So they've played in I think they've known each other since they were 5 or 6, and they played in the same youth teams and things like that. So he's a good pal of his. Yeah, I don't remember him as a player at Sporting. I remember him at Barcelona. He was quite a tough centre back and. And obviously he hadn't really crossed my radar until that promotion. I was like, oh, it's that guy that used to play for Barcelona. And then, it'd be nice if, maybe he gets a third go and sometime, because he does seem to be a regular on the Spanish managerial merry-go-round in recent years. And we'll see.
Yeah. No doubt he'll reappear in the Spanish Segunda at some point this season. I might put a £5 bet on somewhere like Huesca or something like that.
His name has definitely come up with Malaga a couple of times when we've changed manager, but that's never come.
Who needs him when you've got Juan Funes? Less. We were definitely all behind him at the start, weren't we, Matt?
I actually was. I don't care. I didn't come out and slaughter him. I was quite. positive.
I did. I'll hold my hands up and say I did, but he's certainly proving me wrong there. I suppose just to end on then, just to round things up, obviously we look at sort of all the pieces in great academy, legends of football players, wonderful stadium, brilliant city. The pieces are all there, and obviously I know we're Malaga fans, but personally for me, I'd love to see Real Sporting back in the Liga and back in the Liga strong, sort of in the same vein you would see the way that Real Vallecano overperform, or even dare I say, the same abilities that Villarreal have got for, to challenge towards the top end of the table. I'd love to see them back in Europe. I think possibly maybe the closest that we could come to as a comparison is maybe like a Celta Vigo type situation. That'd be brilliant to see, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I perhaps avoided bringing this up, so I'll be Billy Balance here and say, like, I did own shares in Oviedo once, so if Sporting were to go up, it'd be nice if Oviedo were there too, and we could have a La Liga, the top flight Asturian derby. That'd be great. But yeah,
definitely,
they are a great club, Sporting, and just because I know we spoke about their fans earlier, I thought I've got to mention as well. I reminded myself when I said the name of the academy, their fans are called La Mariona, which translates as the big wave.
Oh well, yeah. Those guys as an identity, are some of the most loyal fans in Spain. Like I say, still turn out in their thousands, regardless of what league Real Sporting are in. Obviously, we've mentioned they've only been in the top two leagues, which is a great record in itself. So, yeah, I agree with you entirely. I'd love to be seeing El Derby Asturiano. Why do I keep going Italian when I say that? I don't really know why. Back in the Liga would be absolutely brilliant to see, and seeing all those top sides going there as well, because I think it's time we had Sporting back in the top flight. I want to say thank you for joining me this week, Matt. Obviously, as the unofficial third host, standing in for Paul this week and telling us all about your adventures in Gijón, both on the En Directo and on this episode of Sleeping Giants as well. Obviously, do go listen to that El Partido En Directo that was released today on the Wednesday. It's a really cool listen, and Matt does a fantastic job of really bringing both the journey, the atmosphere, and the game to life. So definitely check it out. Obviously, you've got your own podcast, Matt, in the form of Los Boyos, which has been back for a few months now. It is absolutely flying. I love listening to the episodes there. You got anything to look forward to on Los Boyos soon? Like any good guests coming up, or anything worth of mention?
Yeah, we talked about we've just done an episode on seaside place in the north of Spain. We thought we might do a seaside place in the north of England for our next episode. I'll see if I can get a decent guest for that. Yeah, and I hope he doesn't listen, but I've also been chatting with an Oviedo legend, so I hope he doesn't hear this and thinks, oh no, he's like Sporting. But yeah, that's we're working on that episode. We'll see.
Oh, that sounds absolutely perfect. And I'll say thank you to you guys listening as well. We're looking forward to a really, really big 2026. More projects to come. Obviously, the podcast like this will continue, but we're trying to think of other bits of extra content we can put out there you might be interested in. So if you do have a suggestion what you'd like to see us do here on this podcast, then don't be shy, do let us know. But we're going to be back with bigger and better Revista El Partido soon, hopefully more El Partido en Directos too. Head over to Patreon, follow there, because a lot of the stuff will be appearing on there as well. And thank you, Matt, for joining me this evening. Gracias to you guys at home, and we'll see you again next time on El Partido. Hasta luego.